May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be always acceptable in your sight, my Lord and my Redeemer. Amen. This is the Sunday that is normally referred to as Good Shepherd Sunday. And if you listen carefully to the text, you'll hear a kind of common thread of shepherds and sheep going through it. There is a temptation when we hear Psalm 23 to hear it as gentle and comforting, but also perhaps a little unrealistic. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. It sounds peaceful, predictable, safe. But that is not actually the world that the psalm describes. Because right in the middle of it, we hear this: even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. This is not a psalm about avoiding danger. It is a psalm about traveling through it. And that changes everything. The same thing is true in today's gospel. In John 10, Jesus does not promise that the sheep will live in a threat-free environment. In fact, he speaks plainly about thieves and bandits, those who come to steal, kill, and destroy. The difference is not the absence of danger. The difference is the presence of the shepherd. My sheep hear my voice, Jesus says. I know them, and they follow me. Not because the path is easy, but because the shepherd is trustworthy. And then we turn to Acts, where we see what trust looks like when it takes flesh in a community. The early Christians were not living in secure or settled circumstances. They were a small, vulnerable group in a complex and often hostile world. And yet, they gathered. They prayed. They broke bread. They shared what they had. Not because everything was certain, but because they trusted the one who was leading them. And if we are honest, that speaks directly to us too, because we too live in uncertain terrain. There is uncertainty in the world: political, violence, social, environmental. There is uncertainty in the church: questions about authority, about structure, about the future. And there is uncertainty in our own lives: health, relationships, purpose, direction. We might wish for clear answers, firm ground, guarantees. But more often than not, what we are given is a voice calling us forward. And the question is whether or not we will trust it. This is where the sacraments become not just important, but essential. Because the sacraments are how the Good Shepherd meets us in the uncertainty, not by removing it, but by accompanying us through it. In the Eucharist, we do not receive a solution to all our questions. We receive Christ. We come forward, or in our case, we gather in our own spaces, and we hear the words, "This is my body. This is my blood." It is a profoundly vulnerable act of trust. There is no spectacle, no dramatic proof. Just bread, just wine, just words. And yet, in that simple act, the shepherd feeds the flock. Not because the terrain has suddenly become safe, but because we need strength for the journey. Psalm 23 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Not after the enemies are gone, not once the danger has passed, in their presence. The Eucharist is that table. It is nourishment in the midst of uncertainty. It is communion in the midst of isolation. It is the assurance that Christ is with us, even here, even now. Because if we are honest, uncertainty often exposes our fears, and fear can lead us to wander, to lose our way, to turn inward, to act out of anxiety rather than trust. In baptism, our relationship with the shepherd is established. In reconciliation, whether formal or informal, we are brought back. We are reminded that the shepherd does not abandon the sheep when they stray. The voice calls us again, and we are invited to return. Even the simple act of gathering as church, whether in person or online, is sacramental in its own way. It is a visible sign of an invisible grace, that God is forming a people, even now, even in uncertainty. And that matters. Because one of the greatest temptations in uncertain times is isolation. To believe that we are alone. To believe that we must navigate everything ourselves. To believe that if we do not have clarity, we do not have anything. But the Good Shepherd offers something different. Not certainty, but presence. Not control, but companionship. Not a map, but a voice. My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. And so over time, as we return again and again to the table, to the water, to the community, to prayer, we begin to recognize that voice more clearly. We begin to trust it more deeply. Not because the way has changed, but because we have. We have become a people who know the shepherd. And so perhaps the invitation today is this: not to wait for certainty before we act, not to demand clarity before we trust, but to take the next step, however small, guided by the voice we have come to know. To come to the table, even when we do not have all the answers. To remain in community, even when the future feels unclear. To trust that the shepherd who has led us this far will continue to lead us still. Because the promise of Psalm 23 is not that we will never enter the valley. It is that we will never enter it alone. And the promise of Christ is not that there will be no thieves, no dangers, no uncertainty. It is that his voice will still be there, calling, guiding, sustaining, offering us, even now, life in all its fullness. Amen.